For generations, Kenny Rogers was more than just a country music icon. He was a voice that echoed through time, a storyteller whose songs captured the hearts of millions. With his silver beard, soulful eyes, and that unmistakable voice, he wasn't just a star, he was family to those who grew up with his music. From The Gambler to Lucille and beyond, his songs weren't just hits, they were life lessons set to music. But behind the spotlight and sold-out shows was a man who, in his final days, faced a quiet, heartbreaking goodbye. Tonight, we honor not just the legend of Kenny Rogers, but the man, and the emotional final chapter that left fans around the world in tears. Breaking overnight, the world of country music has lost one of its most beloved legends. Kenny Rogers, the three-time Grammy Award winner whose voice defined a generation, has passed away at the age of 81. According to his representative, Rogers had been under hospice care and died of natural causes at his home in Georgia, surrounded by loved ones. For decades, his music brought joy, comfort, and unforgettable stories to fans around the globe. But in his final years, the man once known for commanding the stage chose a quieter path. In 2015, Kenny shocked fans by announcing his retirement, explaining that he wanted to focus on what mattered most, time with his family, especially his twin sons, Justin and Jordan. Away from the limelight, Rogers lived out his last chapter in peace, but not without health struggles that deeply affected those closest to him. As the once bright spotlight dimmed, the pain of watching a legend fade became all too real. His final days were marked by strength, love, and heartbreaking vulnerability. Kenny Rogers wasn't just a singer, he was a symbol of an era. And while he's gone, his voice and spirit will forever echo in the hearts of millions. It felt like a quiet farewell, almost poetic in its silence. Kenny Rogers had already given the world decades of timeless music. Hits like Lucille, The Gambler, and Islands in the Stream were etched into the hearts of millions. But while the songs remained vibrant, the man behind them began to slowly fade from the public eye. By 2018, concern began to mount. Rogers quietly cancelled the remainder of his farewell tour, citing health concerns that seemed vague at the time. But behind the curtain, the truth was much heavier. He had been privately battling bladder cancer, a brutal condition that few outside his close circle knew about. The energetic performer once beloved on massive stages was now retreating into the shadows of his final chapter. Rare glimpses of Kenny in his final years painted a heartbreaking picture. The robust, silver-bearded icon was now frail, almost unrecognizable to longtime fans. His frame had thinned, and the spark that once lit up arenas was dimming. As the world faced the chaos of the COVID-19 pandemic in early 2020, Kenny's condition rapidly declined. Medical systems were overwhelmed, and the risks of hospitalization too high, so his care shifted to hospice. There, in the comfort of his Georgia home, far from the roar of crowds and the glare of cameras, Kenny Rogers spent his final days surrounded by the people he loved most. It was a private, deeply human ending for a man who had lived an extraordinary public life. His last days were tragically quiet for someone who had lived his entire life in the spotlight. It felt more than just the end of a life when word of his dying leaked out on March 20, 2020. An era seemed to be coming to an end. Grief erupted instantly and was overwhelming. Millions of fans, pop artists, and country musicians shared their personal stories of Kenny's music on social media. Many were most surprised, however, by how quiet and serious his last moments had been. A guy was slowly passing away, his story approaching its last verse, with no grandiose tributes or farewell tour conclusion. The truth is painful. The strongest voices can occasionally fade away, not with a loud crash, but rather with a whisper. In the company of those who were most important to him, Kenny Rogers passed away peacefully away from the stage lights. It was a somber farewell from a man who used to live loudly. And the pain of his absence is only made worse by that contrast. The Gambler. Prior to his reputation as the Gambler being widely known, Kenny Rogers was just a young Houstonian trying to make sense of a difficult life and a mind full of dreams before the Grammy Awards, the duets with Dolly, and the innumerable sold-out arenas. We must go back to the beginning, when everything was still unrefined and unknown, in order to comprehend the calm guy who vanished in 2020. Kenny was born in 1938 into a working-class household as the fourth of 8 children. The Rogers family had experienced adversity before, and his father, a carpenter, battled alcoholism. There was never enough money. Kenny frequently discussed how his family lived in a government housing project and how he felt the need to have more even as a young child. Not only monetarily but also creatively. He noted in a 2012 interview that he needed success, not just something he dreamed of. He previously remarked, "I knew I was meant to do something big, I just didn't know what it was yet." Early on, he discovered music. He received a taste of local popularity while he was a youngster at Jefferson Davis High School, where he established his first band, the Scholars. They were making records and getting concerts, but they weren't making a difference in the world. And most children his age couldn't say more than that. But it was Kenny's voice that truly made him stand out. It's husky, deep, and definitely soulful. It stood out, and that was what would make all the difference, even though it didn't exactly suit the clean-cut pop norms of the period. Kenny experimented with jazz in the late 1950s with the Bobby Doyle Trio. He developed his musical skills and gained knowledge of the ins and outs of the industry while singing and playing stand-up bass. One quality that would come to characterize his career was his unwavering willingness to change styles. However, he was still learning things at the time. He experimented with rock, folk, R&B, and country music. Like a shapeshifter in music, searching for his ultimate form. He would always be driven to change and adapt in order to survive. It wasn't an easy journey from the housing projects of Houston to the top of the charts. It wasn't simple either. However, Kenny Rogers was never one to give up easily. He would soon have his first significant breakthrough and form the band that would revolutionize music thanks to his restless spirit of merging genres. Become famous. It rarely happens suddenly, and Kenny Rogers' path from garage band concerts to international superstardom was no exception. He was an experienced performer by the late 1960s, although he was not yet well known. When he joined a psychedelic rock band with a long name and a short fuse, everything changed. First Edition and Kenny Rogers. Rogers had never produced anything like the First Edition. They reflected their era with their flamboyant manner, avant-garde music, and songs that pushed boundaries. Electric, strange, wild. In their breakthrough single, Kenny's powerful, rumbling voice took center stage. I simply stopped by to check on my condition. A weird, psychedelic song that made it into the top 10 in 1968. The country ballads that would come to characterize him were a far cry from that. However, it demonstrated a vital point. Kenny Rogers was able to move. He could convince you of anything by singing it. For a period, the initial iteration even had its own TV show and had a number of successes. However, the band was no longer relevant by 1975. Both Kenny and tastes were evolving. He began his solo career at the age of 37, when many musicians are already in decline. Many believed him to be insane. Then Lucille arrived. Lucille was a revelation when it was released in 1977. It was a straightforward but impactful tale of a man who meets a married woman in a pub and is confronted by her heartbroken husband. Although the song was mostly country, Kenny won his first Grammy for it thanks to its poignant delivery and witty narrative. All of a sudden, the man who had previously played psychedelic bass was the face of a brand new genre of country music that appealed to people outside of rural America. He then made a hefty wager and won in 1978. Don Schlitz's song, The Gambler, which was given to a number of other musicians before being signed by Kenny, ended up becoming his signature hit. The song was more than just a hit, it was a philosophy, with its catchy chorus and depiction of life as a card game. Knowing when to fold them and when to hold them is essential. Quickly became a catchphrase and a part of the American language. The song cemented Rogers' status as a great storyteller, garnered him another Grammy, and inspired a number of TV films. The hits just kept coming after that. She Has Faith in Me. The County's Coward. The author of Lady is Lionel Richie. Every song over the years added fresh facets to Kenny's character. He was the outlaw, the lover, the gambler, and the common guy. His gruff voice simultaneously conveyed warmth, wisdom, and fatigue. However, duets, especially with his lifelong friend and musical soulmate, Dolly Parton, were one of the most memorable periods of his career. The two luminaries' flawless chemistry was demonstrated by their 1983 single, Islands in the Stream, which went on to become one of the best-selling duets of all time. A treasured chapter in the history of country music, their friendship was characterized by intense respect and playful banter. They captivated audiences with their performances, which were authentic, happy, unscripted, and magical. Rogers had a perfect understanding of how to read an audience. He didn't follow trends. He took things in, filtered them through his own lens, and provided people with something both new and familiar. He was able to retain his appeal to pop radio, television, and even Vegas audiences while dominating country charts in this way. Kenny Rogers refused to fit into a box in a field that frequently thrives on classification. He was more than just a country singer by the middle of the 1980s. He was a worldwide celebrity. Tens of millions of copies of his records were sold. There was his face everywhere. He was making appearances, hosting programs, and soon entering yet another field, acting and business. Before we get there, though, it's important to stop and consider how a young person from the Houston projects became a multimedia tycoon whose voice helped shape generations. There is more to the solution than just the music. The entertainer Kenny Rogers is the source of it. Outside of music, Kenny Rogers was more than simply a country music icon by the 1980s. He was an absolute star in the entertainment industry. Although his voice had catapulted him to the top of the charts, his charisma, presence, and unwavering interest were what really made him stand out outside of the recording studio. Being a singer wasn't enough for Kenny. He was a performer, a storyteller, and most importantly, a man who understood how to build an empire out of talent. Let's begin with his film and television ventures. Rogers featured in a made-for-TV film of the same name in 1980, riding the wave of fame from his 1978 hit, The Gambler. Both the movie and Kenny's portrayal of the seasoned card shark Brady Hawks turned out to be unexpected hits. He was the character, not merely a character. He played the part again in 4 follow-ups over the course of the following 15 years, creating a beloved mini-franchise that introduced his music and persona to a whole new audience. Like Kenny's music, the films were straightforward and frequently sentimental, but they were successful. In addition, he made guest appearances on Dr. Quinn, Medicine Woman, and in other films, such as Coward of the County, which was based on another of his popular songs. No one thought Kenny was a classically trained actor, but he had a deeper purpose. Likability. You wanted to watch him when he was on screen. He exuded a continuous warmth that made people feel at home, whether he was singing a heartbreaking ballad around a campfire or flashing a half-smile at the poker table. Kenny, however, didn't stop with the screen and stage. He also wanted to start his own business. Alongside former KFC executive John Y. Brown Jr., he co-founded the rotisserie chicken restaurant chain Kenny Rogers Roasters in the early 1990s. It was an audacious move. Due of its wood-fired chicken and homemade sides, the chain gained popularity very fast. It had long-term success in Asia, where a number of outlets are still open today, despite eventually contracting in the US. Fun fact, in a vintage Seinfeld episode where Kramer gets fixated on the chicken across the street, Kenny Rogers Roasters even received a humorous reference. Many of her admirers were unaware that Kenny was also a skilled photographer. What began as a pastime evolved into a respectable second job. His books on photography include Kenny Rogers and Your Friends and Mine. This Is My Nation. Capturing unscripted celebrity photos, calm moments, and rural vistas that demonstrated his profound love of beauty and narratives that went beyond songs. Kenny was dedicated to giving back and wasn't one to hoard his fame. He held benefit concerts, donated to numerous charities, and supported causes that ranged from disaster relief to children's hospitals. He raised millions for individuals in need by working with groups like USA for Africa and the Red Cross. He once remarked that it is your duty to give back if you are fortunate enough to succeed in life. He meant it, too. Kenny Rogers had a remarkable talent for connecting people via food, photography, cinema, and philanthropy. He was trustworthy because he was sincere in everything he touched, which is uncommon in the celebrity world. Fame was not something he pursued for its own sake. He was much more than just a man with a guitar because of his quiet confidence and unwavering curiosity, which allowed him to build his legacy piece by piece. The public still recognized him best for the songs he sung and the actual, frequently complicated man who told them, despite the expansion of his empire. The renown is a result of fortune. Kenny Rogers was more than just a gifted storyteller and vocalist. In addition, he was a shrewd businessman who amassed a significant financial empire over the years. His estimated net worth by the time of his death was $250 million, which is evidence of a career that encompassed far more than just successful albums and sold-out tours. Several sources of income contributed to his wealth. With more than 120 million records sold worldwide and hits that are still played, covered, and licensed for movies and advertisements, his music royalties naturally provided a strong basis. Even after his passing, his catalog alone continues to bring in a substantial amount of money. However, Kenny was never satisfied with depending just on his music. Being an early proponent of artist entrepreneurship, he saw the importance of diversifying revenue streams due to the unstable nature of the entertainment sector. He co-founded the rotisserie chicken restaurant chain Kenny Rogers Roars in the 1990s, which swiftly grew and helped him succeed commercially in a completely different market. Even though the company subsequently reduced its operations in the US, it flourished abroad, especially in Asia, and gave his portfolio a profitable new angle. In addition, Rogers made wise media and real estate investments. He also held his own publishing rights, which allowed him more control over his music and profits, a perk that many musicians never fully experience. Kenny eschewed the accoutrements of luxury despite accumulating enormous wealth. He was renowned for his modesty. In contrast to many celebrities, he frequently wore simple clothing and led a modest lifestyle. Instead of showing off his wealth, he continued to prioritize his family, charities, and producing enduring work. Kenny's financial security allowed him to retire whenever he wanted. He decided to spend his final years with his wife Wanda and his twin boys instead of touring constantly and being in the spotlight. His hard work and financial acumen in creating a lasting legacy allowed him to enjoy these luxuries of peace and privacy. One that encompassed business, philanthropy, and personal fulfillment in addition to music. A multifaceted individual. At his core, Kenny Rogers was just a man looking for connection, despite his wealth, celebrity, and impeccable stage presence. Beneath his silver-bearded smile and chart-topping hits, he had a complex and colorful personal life, and like the rest of us, he wasn't shy about it. Kenny often spoke brazenly about his regrets, his marriages, and the instructions he discovered alongside the manner. Let's talk about those marriages, all 5 of them. Kenny himself joked about his love existence more than as soon as, pronouncing, "I've been married 5 instances, and I have sooner or later discovered a way to do it right." His early marriages, mainly all through his upward thrust to fame, struggled underneath the load of regular journeying and the strain of stardom. He admitted he turned into often extra focused on his profession than on nurturing his relationships. Track changed into always first, he as soon as stated. That does not go away, lots room for something else, but in 1997, some things shifted. He married Wanda Miller, a female 28 years his junior. And by using all accounts, it turned into one-of-a-kind this time. They had been collectively for over a long time, proving the skeptics incorrect. Wanda wasn't just his wife. She turned into his partner, his caregiver all through his final years, and the anchor he continually seemed to be attempting to find. Kenny credited her with supporting him discover peace, stability, and the type of love that didn't want to be completed for the cameras. Collectively, they welcomed twin boys, Justin and Jordan, in 2004 when Kenny became 65. Turning into a father again past due in life changed him profoundly. He softened. He slowed down. And he made selections like retiring from traveling that prioritized circle of relatives over fame. He often said that raising the twins gave him a 2D threat on the kind of fatherhood he had ignored with his older children from preceding marriages. You may see the joy in his face each time he mentioned them. It wasn't simply delight. It was gratitude. Regardless of his many successes, Kenny in no way pretended he changed into ideal. He spoke brazenly about his struggles with getting old, his beyond mistakes, and the pain that from time to time got here with reputation. He recounted that he had overlooked out on crucial family moments due to the fact he become chasing the next big show or the subsequent hit track. In interviews later in Lifestyles, you may hear the mirrored image in his voice, the humility of a person who had lived, discovered, and come out the opposite aspect with a clearer experience of what truly mattered. And then there was his deep experience of faith. Kenny wasn't one to preach, but he carried a quiet spirituality with him. He believed in reason, in timing, in second possibilities. He noticed track as a shape of ministry, now not in a spiritual experience, however as a way to attach, heal, and inform the truth. That's likely why his songs hit so deeply. They weren't simply catchy, they had been human. So sure, Kenny Rogers wore many hats. Movie star, businessman, actor, photographer, but in the quiet moments, the ones away from the microphones and cameras, he turned into a husband, a father, a person who knew heartbreak and pleasure, and who located peace later in existence after many years of searching. And while he sooner or later stepped far away from the highlight, he left in the back of not just a series of hits, but a deeply private legacy that pondered the overall complicated man behind the music. The legacy he left at the back of. Whilst Kenny Rogers handed away in March 2020, it felt like a bankruptcy had closed, no longer simply in USA music, however in American lifestyle. His voice had been a constant associate for generations. From honky-tonks to high-rises, from vinyl to streaming playlists, his songs have been woven into everyday existence. However, Kenny's proper legacy runs deeper than chart numbers or price tag income. It is about the emotional imprint he left in the back of. Start with the numbers, even though, and they may be remarkable. Kenny offered over 120 million information worldwide, making him one of the best-selling artists of all time. He racked up multiple Grammy Awards, CMA Awards, and American Music Awards, along with a Lifetime Achievement Award from the Country Music Affiliation in 2013. He became inducted into the US of A Song Hall of Fame that identical year. An honor, he stated, supposed greater to him than any other. However, Kenny's best fulfillment wasn't the trophies. It became his capability to transcend genre, geography, and even generations. His tune wasn't just U.S. A. or pop. It became storytelling. He sang about gamblers and damaged hearts, younger love and second chances, circle of relatives, legacies and quiet regrets. Those weren't just songs. They were lifestyles, instructions wrapped in melodies you couldn't overlook. The Gambler alone should function a metaphorical guide e-book for existence. Recognize when to keep them. Realize while to fold them. Wasn't just about playing cards. It was approximately understanding your limits, choosing your battles, and residing with intention. That is why the music persevered. It wasn't flashy or overproduced. It was sincere. Like Kenny himself. When the information of his dying hit the headlines, tributes poured in from each nook of the enjoyment world. Dolly Parton, his longtime pal and duet associate, posted a tearful video pronouncing, "My coronary heart is broken. I cherished Kenny with all my coronary heart. My heart is broken." United States stars like Reba McEntire, Blake Shelton, and Brad Paisley shared their grief. Even artists outside the genre, from Lionel Richie to Threat the Rapper, spoke up about how Kenny's tune had touched them. Lovers too flooded social media with reminiscences. Tales about first dances to overtime, Avenue journeys scored by means of Lucille and family sing-alongs to Islands in the Stream. His tune had marked humans' lives, frequently in small but lasting ways. That's what real legacy looks as if. Now not simply being remembered, but being felt. Or even now, Kenny's influence can nevertheless be heard within the voices of modern-day artists who combo United States with soul, pop, and rock. Stars like Chris Stapleton, Casey Musgraves, and Luke Combs convey echoes of that identical style-blurring spirit. Kenny helped tear down the wall among USA and mainstream, establishing doors for people who accompanied. He made us of a cool without watering it down. He made it human. Beyond the tune, his charitable paintings left an effect, too. He wasn't loud approximately it, but he gave generously to track schooling applications, health care efforts, and children's charities. He as soon as helped build a faculty in Atlanta. He sang for causes he believed in, and he used his fame to boost others up without awaiting applause. Kenny Rogers failed to want to dominate headlines or chase viral moments. He constructed something a long way greater long-lasting. A frame of labor rooted in sincerity, soul, and timeless truth. His voice changed into right-away recognizable. But even extra effective changed into the way he made you experience like you knew him, like he knew you. And in the long run, it is the sort of legacy that in no way fades. The quiet goodbye. Kenny Rogers lived his lifestyles in full coloration, bright degree lighting, platinum statistics, roaring crowds, and timeless duets. Yet, the end of his journey wasn't marked through fanfare or a dramatic curtain name. It got here quietly within the early days of a global pandemic, some distance from the arenas and flashing cameras that had described his a long-time lengthy profession. And maybe it really is the maximum poetic ending he may want to have requested for. In March 2020, the arena became just beginning to shut down. Flights had been being grounded. Occasions were cancelled. Cities went quiet. And so did Kenny. He passed away in hospice care, surrounded via his cherished ones, in a relaxed Georgia home that changed into stuffed now not with applause, however with peace. There was no final concert, no dramatic farewell tour, just a quiet goodbye from a man who had already said the entirety he wanted to say via track, through tale, and via a voice that had turned out to be part of our collective reminiscence. His demise became officially attributed to natural causes, although it changed into widely known he had been battling bladder-most cancers. The pandemic intended that public memorials needed to be delayed or cancelled altogether, making the goodbye sense even greater remote for enthusiasts who wanted one greater second with him. It was heartbreaking, yes, but oddly fitting. Kenny, always one to allow the tune communicate louder than the singer, bowed out gracefully, as though whispering his final lyric. But, in that stillness, his legacy best grew louder. Humans around the arena dusted off vintage vinyl statistics, streamed his best hits, and played The Gambler Adore It Become Gospel. Tributes flowed in from lovers of every age, individuals who had grown up together with his song, fallen in like to his duets, and weathered heartbreak with his ballads as their soundtrack. Unexpectedly, the person who had stepped away so quietly became being remembered everywhere. From barred jukeboxes in Texas to BBC specials in London, his songs crammed dwelling rooms and vehicle rides, bringing comfort in unsure instances. In an international spinning with chaos, there was something grounding about Kenny Rogers's track. It reminded us of simpler truths: love, loss, luck, remorse, redemption. He did not write every song he sang, but he selected each one cautiously, like a storyteller picking the following chapter. His finest power became now not just his voice, however the way he made you experience like he understood yours. Even now, years after his passing, his songs stay stitched into the fabric of American lifestyles. Lady, Lucille, Coward of the County. Over the years and of course The Gambler. They still discover their manner into weddings, funerals, avenue journeys, and quiet evenings on my own. His voice became never perfect in a technical experience, but it carried something rarer: character. He sounded like enjoy, like awareness, like someone who had visible the tough elements of existence and lived to inform the story with simply the right mix of grit and style. Beyond the hits, Kenny Rogers also leaves behind a cultural blueprint for what it way to conform at the same time as staying real to yourself. He wasn't afraid to take dangers. He moved from dub to jazz to United States to pop and lower back once more without dropping his identification. He did duets with every person from Dottie West to Sheena Easton. He acted. He opened a bird restaurant. He posted photography books. He lived an existence so full it could have spanned several lifetimes. However, possibly what humans will don't forget most isn't always the success. It's the humility. Despite all the reputation, Kenny never seemed to carry an ego. He frequently laughed at himself in interviews. He talked brazenly approximately his failures and flaws. He admitted when he failed to get it proper, and he gave credit score in which it changed into do. That kind of honesty is rare, specifically within the enjoyment world. And it's probably why he becomes so cherished. No longer just favorite, but certainly cherished. And that love became a Manor Street. Kenny appreciated his fans deeply. Even in his very last years, as his health declined, he made an effort to attach. He did not chase traits or pressure himself lower back into the highlight. He allowed his frame of labor speak for him. It is something only a truly assured artist can do. Walk away understanding you have already said sufficient. Now, years after his final observe dwindled, his voice nevertheless echoes. Not in a haunting way, but like an vintage friend stopping via to remind you that lifestyles is messy, lovely, unpredictable, and well worth every second. In a global that actions too rapid, Kenny Rogers presented something undying. A pause, a tale, a melody that still lingers long after the tune stops. There is a reason people nevertheless quote The Gambler. It is no longer just about playing cards. It's about understanding your place within the global, accepting what you cannot manage, and choosing your moments with care. That philosophy wasn't just a lyric. It changed into how Kenny lived his life. And it is how he left it too. Quietly, gracefully, on his personal phrases. And perhaps it's the lesson he left us with. Not simply in tune, but in existence. Understand when to maintain on, know when to allow pass, and continually leave a legacy worth remembering. So, right here's to Kenny Rogers, a gambler, a gentleman, a storyteller, and a soul who knew that now and again the maximum effective goodbyes are those whispered, no longer shouted. He can be gone, however the songs and the testimonies will constantly carry on. Thanks for looking. Join the channel for many